They thought the deal was theirs the moment I left the room. What they didn't know was, so was the technology, and the signature the investor needed would never be theirs. The morning I stepped into that glass-walled boardroom, I wasn't nervous, I was ready. My name is Amelia Keller, and for the past 3 years, I'd been building a dynamic risk-sorting model that could analyze market fluctuations across 9 verticals in under 10 seconds. A tool that didn't just react, it predicted. And now, Stratus Capital, the most powerful venture firm on the East Coast, was here to see it. They sat across the table in tailored suits, eyes sharp, arms folded. Behind me stood Greg, our CEO, and a few of his chosen executives. They didn't say much. That was fine. This wasn't about them. I connected my laptop to the main display, hands steady. "Good morning," I began. "Today you'll see why this model doesn't just assess risk. It tells you where the future is most certain and most profitable." The presentation ran exactly 16 minutes. I spoke clearly, showed live simulations, and ran a real-time test on last quarter's data. It outperformed industry benchmarks by 31%. When I finished, there was a full 10 seconds of silence. Then Michael Rhodes, managing partner at Stratus, leaned forward, folding his hands. "That," he said, "was the first demo today that didn't waste our time." Behind me, Greg chuckled. "We aim to impress." Michael didn't even look at him. He looked at me. "Who led the technical design?" "I did," I replied. He nodded. "Keep her on the project. We'll move forward." It was subtle, but I caught it. They didn't say we'll invest in your company. They said we'll move forward with me. I walked out of that room with my head held high, not just because the deal was real, but because, for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. Not as a cog in their machine, but as the architect of something real, something powerful. I didn't know it yet, but that feeling wouldn't last long. I should have known something was wrong when I didn't get the invite. The morning after the pitch, the office was buzzing, glasses clinked, laughter spilled out of conference rooms that had been silent for weeks. Greg had ordered champagne for the whole floor. There were banners, balloons, a massive cake with gold lettering that read, "900 million secured. The future is now." I stood in the hallway, watching from a distance. My name wasn't on the banner. No one even looked my way. Yesterday, I was the one running live simulations in front of the most powerful investors in the country. Today, I was an afterthought. I checked my calendar, no strategy meeting, no follow-up debrief, just an empty day and a sea of congratulations, none of which came my way. Greg stood at the center of it all, drink in hand, giving a speech that echoed through the halls. "This is the result of tireless leadership," he said, "vision and teamwork, but above all, a commitment to excellence from the very top." The team applauded. Someone handed him a plaque. I stood in silence near the kitchenette, invisible. That's when Leo approached me. He was new, fresh out of Stanford, with too much enthusiasm and not enough political instinct. He glanced around before leaning in. "Hey, this might be weird, but aren't you the one who built the model?" I blinked. "Yeah, I am." He looked confused. "I was reviewing the internal documentation they gave us this morning, and your name wasn't in the architecture file. It just says, core system finalized by executive leadership." I thought it was a mistake. It wasn't. I forced a smile. "It's not a mistake, just the way things work around here." Leo hesitated. "You should be up there. Greg didn't even mention you." I shrugged, but something cracked inside me. This wasn't just a case of being forgotten. It was deliberate. My contributions were being erased, polished down to a talking point Greg could wear like a badge. I walked back to my desk. There was a gift box on the chair, a branded notebook, and a pen with the company's logo. No card, no signature, just a silent reminder. I was no longer seen as essential. I was useful until I wasn't. The celebration roared behind me. But for me, the air had gone cold. The same room I'd helped fill with promise now echoed with something else entirely. Erasure. And I wasn't sure yet if I would disappear quietly or leave a mark they'd never forget. It came at 3:02 in the morning. I woke up to a soft chime on my phone and a blinking subject line. Compensation adjustment, effective immediately. I opened it, still half asleep, expecting a budget update or routine company-wide memo. Instead, I found a single paragraph, cold, clinical, and completely devoid of context. Due to strategic realignment of departmental resources, your base salary will be adjusted by 42%. This change reflects evolving organizational priorities and goes into effect this pay cycle. No meeting, no warning, no signature, just a generic HR email address and a corporate disclaimer at the bottom. I sat up in bed, rereading the words, then again and again. Each time, they cut deeper, 42%. They were slicing away almost half of my pay after I helped land the most important investment in company history. No mention of my role in the model, no acknowledgement of my work, just a sterile blow delivered in the middle of the night. As if they hoped I wouldn't read it until it was too late to fight. By the time I walked into the office that morning, my badge no longer gave access to the engineering floor. I had to be escorted by Leo, who looked more nervous than I did. "I think they moved your desk," he muttered, glancing at the tablet in his hand. They had. My new workstation was shoved into a corner near the emergency exit. No window, no monitors, and no proximity to the product team. The drive folders I used every day were locked. The simulation environment I built from scratch was now labeled restricted. I logged in. Access denied. I was still employed, still under contract, but they had taken everything that mattered and left me with the shell of a title. Greg passed by an hour later, pausing just long enough to make eye contact. "Got your email?" he asked. Voice smooth, smug. I stared at him. No explanation, no conversation, just a number. He smiled without warmth. "You should have seen this coming. Amelia, you were getting too comfortable, too visible." I stepped closer, jaw tight. "Visible? I built the very thing you're celebrating." Greg leaned in, his voice dropping just enough for only me to hear. "You built it under our roof. You were compensated. You should know your place." I said nothing. Not then. But in that moment, something inside me broke. Not like glass, not loud. It cracked like ice under pressure, quiet, icy, deep. They thought I would swallow this. They had no idea what I still held in my hands. The silence was louder than anything Greg could have said to my face. The morning after the cut, I walked into the office and it felt wrong. The usual greetings, the casual morning chatter by the espresso machine, even the polite nods, gone. I passed coworkers I had mentored for years, and suddenly they had somewhere urgent to be. Their eyes avoided mine. Their smiles evaporated. I sat at my new desk, if you could call it that, wedged between a file cabinet and a flickering overhead light. The chair squeaked every time I breathed, and the air was colder here. Or maybe that was just in my head. The worst part wasn't the space. It was the feeling that I was now a ghost in a place I helped build. No Slack messages, no emails, not even the weekly team briefing invite. My calendar was empty, my role undefined, my presence inconvenient. Hours passed. I pretended to work. Clicking through documents I was no longer authorized to edit. Everything I touched came back with the same two words: access denied. Around 11, Leo hovered nearby, holding a folder and fidgeting with his sleeve. He was clearly torn, after a few false starts. He finally stepped into my space. "Hey," he said, voice low. "Sorry, I wasn't sure if I should. I looked up. It's okay. What is it? He glanced over his shoulder, then pulled out a printed packet. I've been asked to review this for the investor handoff next week, but I don't understand half the architecture, and I was hoping you could maybe clarify a few. Before I could answer, Greg's voice rang out from across the room. Leo, my office, now! Leo froze. Greg's tone wasn't loud, but it cut like a knife. He didn't wait, just turned and walked away. Leo gave me a pained look and mouthed, Sorry. 5 minutes later, the file was returned to my desk, folded shut, no questions asked, no answers wanted. I sighed and flipped through it out of habit, until I stopped cold. The architecture overview, the source model spec. My name was gone. No mention, no footnote, no built by. They had stripped me out completely, like I never existed. A cold weight settled in my chest. I wasn't just being pushed aside, I was being erased by the very people who had once begged me to stay late, to fix what others broke, to build the system they now wore like a crown. I sat still for a long time, staring at that page, feeling the weight of every ignored effort, every stolen credit, every silent betrayal. And for the first time since this began, I didn't feel angry. I felt nothing at all. The silence had nearly convinced me I was powerless. But then I remembered. I'd written the rules before they ever knew the game. That night, I went home drained. My apartment, usually a quiet refuge, felt like a hollow shell. I dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes, and sank into the couch without turning the lights on. I stared at the ceiling, blank and motionless, until something in me flickered, a question I hadn't asked myself in weeks. Do they even have the right to take this from me? I got up and opened the black metal file box buried at the back of my closet. It was dusty, untouched for years. Inside were the original design drafts of the model, time-stamped and notarized. Next to them, an envelope marked with a sticky note in my own handwriting. Before employment, just in case. My fingers trembled slightly as I pulled out the licensing agreement I'd drafted with my lawyer long ago, back when I thought this company might fail. And I needed protection. Clause 6.3.4. In the event of demonstrable, unethical treatment or role reassignment in conflict with original agreement of duties, the licensee forfeits rights to the intellectual property described herein. I had built the system alone, refined it independently, and retained conditional ownership when I brought it in. They were allowed to use it, not own it, and now, they'd violated every condition that clause protected. I sat in stunned silence for a few moments. Then I leaned back, a slow breath filling my lungs for the first time in days. It wasn't over, not even close. That's when the next twist came, soft, almost eerie in its timing. A message appeared on my private inbox, not company issued. From Michael Rhodes at stratusvc.com. Subject, no subject. Amelia, quick question. Hypothetically speaking, if your architecture were to stand alone, separate from corporate infrastructure, would it still function at full capacity? Just curious. I stared at the message. Heartbeat rising. Stratus was watching, maybe even waiting, and they weren't committed to the company. They were committed to what I had created. They knew the truth, and now, so did I. No more tears. No more waiting for fairness. That night, I opened a blank document and wrote 3 words at the top. Take it back. I wasn't planning revenge. I was restoring ownership. By the end of the week, I wasn't angry anymore, just tired. I sat at my desk late Friday evening, long after everyone else had left, with only the hum of the HVAC system and the dim glow of a hallway light keeping me company. The walls felt like they were closing in. Every day that passed, I became less of a person and more of a shadow haunting the perimeter of what I used to own. I opened my laptop, not to work, but to erase, one folder at a time. I began deleting pieces of myself, personal notes, old test logs, side experiments I used to be proud of, every simulation I'd ever run, every late-night idea scribbled into prototype code, trashed. I hovered over the folder labeled Amelia Keller Archive, fingers trembling ever so slightly. This wasn't just digital clutter. This was my proof. My fingerprints on everything they now pretended was theirs. But holding on to it felt like holding on to hope I couldn't afford anymore. I opened a blank document, typed the words, "Effective immediately. I resign from my position at..." And then I stopped, somewhere beneath the desk clutter. Wedged between an unused notebook and an old keycard was a flash drive. I didn't remember placing it there. Curiosity took over, and I plugged it in. A single file popped up. Dad, one last talk.move. I stared at the name for a long time before clicking. The screen flickered to life. There he was, my father, recorded in our garage 6 years ago. Sitting beside the workbench where I'd first built a prototype of the risk model. If you're watching this, then something went sideways. Listen, people will take credit. They'll push you down. That's the cost of being brilliant in places that fear your light. But don't let them silence you. If they won't recognize your worth, don't leave quietly. Leave loud. Leave in a way they'll never forget. Walk out carrying your name and make them wish they'd said it louder. I paused the video. My eyes stung. Suddenly, the resignation letter on my screen looked pathetic, like giving away the last piece of something sacred. That's when my email pinged. A new message, no subject line, just an attachment. From Leo, "Don't tell anyone I sent this. Just thought you should see it." I opened the PDF. It was a confidential restructure plan, an org chart in red and green boxes. At the top, Greg's initials, in the margin. A scribbled note, "Remove a K role entirely, Q3. Absorb into ops, no attribution." No attribution, not a transfer, not a reassignment. Erasure. My hands curled into fists. Greg hadn't just stolen my voice. He planned to make it so I had never spoken. But now, I had two things I didn't have yesterday. Proof that they never valued me, and a reason not to go quietly. I closed the resignation letter, opened a new file, typed one word in bold. All caps, build. Something shifted inside me the moment I hit delete on my resignation draft. I wasn't walking out as a victim anymore. I was walking out as an architect. Saturday morning. I brewed a pot of coffee at 6:30 sharp and pulled my old laptop out of storage, the one that had never touched the company's network. I powered it up, opened my encrypted drive, and pulled out every original build of the risk model, every independent research note, every asset with my initials stamped across the metadata. By 9, I was drafting the legal termination of use letter under Clause 6.3.4. By noon, it was notarized. By 4, it had been served to the company's legal team via courier. No drama, no explosion, just a quiet severance of access. They didn't know it yet, but the foundation of their $900 million empire had just been revoked. That night, I made one more call, this time, to a boutique law firm in Boston that specialized in intellectual property separation cases. Their lead attorney had worked with the same investor group that funded Stratus Capital's satellite ventures. They didn't ask many questions. By Monday, Keller Dynamics LLC was officially registered. The office, a small private suite in a co-working space 2 blocks from my apartment. The mission, refine the model, rebuild it from the version they had watered down. The plan, wait until the perfect moment and then show them what they gave up. By Wednesday, I was sitting alone in that new office, watching clean lines of code rebuild a system that had once made them rich. The version they had stolen was outdated, incomplete. But this one moved like lightning through sand. It was faster, smarter, and mine. I didn't tell anyone, not yet. The fewer people knew, the cleaner the line between their world and mine. But someone found me anyway. Thursday afternoon. I heard a soft knock on the glass door of the shared hallway. I looked up and saw Leo, fidgeting, hands in his pockets. He didn't come in right away, just stood there, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to cross a line that had once been invisible, but now felt very real. I opened the door. He stepped in and looked around the minimal setup. Just one desk, one chair, and a screen filled with glowing data. "So, this is real?" he asked quietly. "It's very real," I said. "And it's just the beginning." He nodded slowly, then leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. "If you need someone to help build this, someone who's not interested in politics, just truth, I've already picked my side." I blinked. Leo, the same kid who had hesitated to even talk to me 2 weeks ago, now choosing to stand on scorched earth, with me. I didn't smile, I didn't cheer. I simply pulled out a second chair. "I hope you know how to work weekends," I said. And just like that, Keller Dynamics wasn't mine alone anymore. It was becoming ours. The conference room was too quiet for celebration. And yet, the walls were lined with catered trays, branded portfolios, and embossed pens no one would touch. Greg stood at the head of the table, flanked by 2 members of his executive team, all dressed in identical shades of gray-blue suits, unified, calculated, hollow. His voice filled the room with forced confidence as he clicked through his investor presentation, selling the vision of a company he didn't build on the back of a product he didn't understand. I sat near the end of the table. No nameplate, no microphone, just a guest badge clipped to my blazer, the kind reserved for consultants and interns. Leo sat beside me, eyes scanning the room, shoulders tight. We had discussed this moment all night, played it out in variables and if-then scenarios, like a chess match against a machine that thought it had already won. "Ah, and finally," Greg said, switching to the last slide, "you'll find the deployment roadmap detailing full integration by Q4, with model performance metrics already surpassing benchmark standards." Michael Rhodes, the managing partner from Stratus Capital, leaned back slightly in his chair. His expression was unreadable, but his pen stopped tapping. A long pause followed. Then a quiet, measured voice broke the stillness. "Thank you, Greg," Michael said. "Before we proceed, there's one last confirmation we'll need." Greg smiled confidently. "Of course, legal compliance, due diligence." Michael shook his head once. "Intellectual property clearance. We'll need written confirmation from the model's original architect that the system is authorized for commercial deployment under this company's name." Greg blinked. Just once, then quickly recovered. "Our tech is owned internally, fully integrated through our systems, no external licensing required." "That's not what I asked." Michael's voice sharpened slightly. "We need a direct acknowledgement from Amelia Keller." All eyes turned to me. Greg laughed, tight and hollow. "Ms. Keller is here as a courtesy. She's not involved in the signature process." "She's involved now," Michael said. "Stratus doesn't invest $900 million without verifying who truly owns the code we're buying into." My fingers rested on the folded document in my lap. It was already printed, already notarized, a single sentence that determined everything. The model is no longer licensed for use by Northgate Systems under any form. I met Greg's eyes. For the first time. He looked uncertain, not angry, not dismissive, just uncertain. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I simply placed the sealed envelope on the table and slid it across. Michael picked it up, read the header silently, then looked at me. "You're the only person in this room who's told us the truth." Greg's mouth opened, but no sound came out. And that silence? It was the sound of leverage shifting, of masks cracking, of a company standing on stolen code, watching the floor vanish beneath it. And I hadn't even said a word. It only took 12 words to turn the room into an avalanche. 12 words from Greg, spoken loud, sharp, and dripping with condescension. "We don't need you. Amelia, the system runs just fine without you." There was a pause. Not long, but long enough for everyone to absorb it. Long enough for me to hear the scratching of pens halt mid-note, and the shallow gasp from the youngest intern in the corner. I didn't move at first. I just looked at him, Greg, the man who once called me the future of this company. Now pretending I was dead weight in front of a 9-figure investor panel. He said it in front of Stratus, on purpose, to strip me publicly. I stood slowly. There was no tremble in my hands this time, no doubt in my voice, just a deep, grounded calm that comes when fury has already passed and turned to fire. "I'm glad you said that. Greg," I said, stepping away from the wall. "Because now, no one will wonder if this was an accident." He laughed, short and smug. "If this is about credit again, we've moved past that." I opened my briefcase. "No, Greg, this is about ownership." I pulled out the printed termination notice, 1 page, heavy with weight, and laid it flat on the table in front of Michael Rhodes and the other Stratus partners. "I'm invoking Clause 6.3.4 of the IP licensing agreement, effective 4 days ago. This company lost all rights to my model, its derivative forms, and its commercial use in any context." Michael reached forward, unfolded the document, and scanned it in silence. Then he looked at Greg. "Is this true?" Greg stammered. She can't do that. The model is part of our infrastructure. It's embedded." Michael raised a single brow. "But is it licensed?" Greg froze. No answer. Michael turned back to me. "Is the architecture still functional, under your control?" I nodded. "And improved, faster, more secure." He didn't hesitate. "Then we'll proceed with our investment as discussed." Greg blinked. "As discussed with who?" Michael set the paper down and stood. "With Keller Dynamics." Gasps echoed. Greg's mouth dropped open, red rising in his face. He looked to his team, to the lawyers, to anyone who might fix this moment. No one moved. "You're making a mistake," he said, voice cracking. "No," Michael replied. "We're correcting one." Leo leaned forward and whispered to me. "They have no idea how far behind they are now." I nodded slowly, because Greg had just watched $900 million leave the building, and I hadn't even raised my voice. The press release went live at 8:02 in the morning. Stratus Capital invests $900 million into Keller Dynamics, redefining the future of predictive intelligence. My name was in the headline, not as a footnote, not in the third paragraph, front and center, just like it always should have been. The article made its rounds in under an hour, hitting every major outlet. From TechSlate to the Wall Journal, it didn't take long for my former colleagues at Northgate Systems to notice. Within 30 minutes. I had unread messages from at least a dozen employees, some shocked, some apologetic. A few quietly asking if Keller was hiring. Our new office wasn't huge. Not yet. But it had high ceilings, clean glass walls, and something Northgate never gave me. Air to breathe, real light, and complete control. Leo sat across from me, reviewing our roadmap. The title on his new business card? Chief Technology Officer. He'd earned it, through loyalty, through grit, and through a decision he made when the room was still dark and uncertain. "This feels weird," he said, smiling. "Good weird, like we're building something that matters." "We are," I told him. "And this time, we're doing it right." The doors to Keller Dynamics opened that morning with a team of 12. Every single one of them had left Northgate willingly, some quietly, others not so much. They weren't just developers and analysts, they were believers, people who had seen what happens when power is hoarded and credit is stolen. Now, they were building something better. Later that afternoon, I received a short email, no subject line. If I'd seen it earlier, maybe this would have ended differently. But I guess it's too late now, isn't it? Gee. I stared at it for a few seconds, then closed the tab without replying. He was right. It was far too late. By the end of the month, Northgate Systems was under audit for intellectual property fraud. 40% of their operations were shut down or absorbed. Greg stepped down voluntarily, pending investigation. Publicly, they blamed internal misalignment. Privately, they knew they'd bet against the wrong person and lost everything. As for us, Stratus funded a multi-year roadmap that included real-time risk modeling, humanitarian crisis prediction, and even climate-based financial mitigation tools. What I'd started as a single-use market model was now evolving into something that could actually change things, not just for companies, for people. We weren't chasing revenge anymore. We were building legacy. Let me say this. For anyone out there feeling invisible, you don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to destroy to win. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is build something so undeniable, they can't ignore you anymore. And if you've ever been pushed aside, erased, or underestimated, remember my name. Or better yet, remember your own. Because the world has a funny way of circling back to those who stand their ground. If this story moved you, if you've ever felt like Amelia, like Leo, like you're on the edge of something bigger, subscribe, leave a comment, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because some stories don't end with collapse. They begin again, with quiet power,